matter how good an adaptation of a novel, movie, or existing TV show might be, it's incredibly rare for said adaptation to clearly surpass the material that inspired it. More often than not, the original novel contains more depth and detail, or the adaptation simply bungles an aspect of the translation that rubs fans of the source the wrong way. Yet there are always exceptions to the rule, and in the world of TV there are just a handful of series which manage to categorically exceed the achievements of their inspiration. It's extremely tricky to maintain a level of creative superiority over multiple seasons with so many moving parts in the fray, and while none of these shows are literally perfect, they all at least offered a superior experience to the material that inspired their creation in the first place. For all but the most ardent Source purists, it was basically not a contest. So with that in mind then, I'm Ellie with What Culture, here with 10 TV shows that improved upon the source material. Number 10. Dexter. Jeff Lindsay's Dexter book series laid firm foundations for Showtime's Michael C. Hall starring TV show, and while the adaptation ultimately went off the rails in its original run, on the law of averages it still eclipses Lindsay's oft unwielding source material. For starters, Michael C. Hall brings a humanity to Dexter that's not nearly as pronounced in the more detached novels, and the expanded canvas allows us to become better acquainted with the stacked deck of supporting characters, several of whom die much earlier in the books. The novels also massively shot themselves in the foot when the third book, Dexter in the Dark, revealed that Dexter's dark passenger was a metaphysical entity, most likely the offspring of an ancient god called Moloch. The twist was near universally despised by critics and fans, enough that Lindsay himself even admitted it was a mistake and abandoned it for future novels. For many, though, the damage had been done. For as poorly as Dexter's original TV run ended, and as silly as it got leading up to that infamous finale, it had the sense to never even consider introducing unambiguously supernatural elements. Number 9. Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's easy to forget that Buffy the Vampire Slayer wasn't a purely original IP when the TV show launched in 1997. It was in fact based on the Joss Whedon-penned 1992 film of the same name. The movie, starring Kristy Swanson as Buffy, was a mild commercial success but critical failure, with Whedon later claiming that the film was sanitized far from his darker, more sarcastic original vision, prompting him to eventually walk away from the project. But years later, Whedon was invited to develop the concept into a TV reboot, which he did by partially self-funding a 25-minute pilot episode that successfully went to series. And just like that, with Sarah Michelle Gellar in the lead role, Buffy became a pop culture phenomenon for its 7-season run. It's a rare retelling that's better than the source in every single possible way. As such, it's tough to imagine any Buffy fans out there who prefer the 1992 movie to the richer TV series, which finally brought Whedon's original vision to life as intended. Number 8. The Umbrella Academy. The Umbrella Academy is one of the finest feathers in Netflix's cap right now, a ludicrously entertaining superhero series elevated by its unexpectedly affecting writing and outstanding ensemble cast. The TV show is adapted from Gerard Way and Gabriel Barr's acclaimed comic series, yet as entertaining as it is, the show takes that comic book blueprint and rides it to the next level. The big advantage of the Netflix show over the comic is the larger canvas for character development. It invests so much time in its focal heroes, and after spending 30 hours with them to date across 3 seasons, it's safe to say that fans are firmly attached. The comics certainly tout a more heightened, fantastical world, but the TV show is a much more emotionally rich experience, aided by its slower pace compared to the comic's more frantic clip. The comic and TV show make for fine companion pieces, but the Netflix adaptation simply takes the IP to a more thoughtful, affecting place that the comic never did. Number 7. Battlestar Galactica. 2004's Battlestar Galactica series was a reimagining of Glenn A. Larson's original 1978 show, and while so many reboots and revivals lose the thread that made the original a hit in the first place, that's not at all the case here. This new take was slicker, yes, but also grittier, touted deeper character development, and benefited from its considerably more vast world building. Though the 70s series is still a fun, campy watch today, it just can't measure up to the reboot, which fleshes out everything. What with its larger 4-season, 76-episode run compared to the original's unfortunately curtailed single 24-episode season. If the 78 Battlestar is a more giddy, adventurous yarn, the 2004 show emerged in the shadow of 9/11 and reflects the concerns of that period, namely fundamentalist terrorism, in a way that can still be taken seriously and remains compulsively watchable almost 20 years later. Number 6. Orange is the New Black. Netflix's acclaimed prison dramedy Orange is the New Black is based on the real Piper Kerman's 2010 memoir of the same name. But perhaps more than any other TV show on this list, it proves how a firecracker ensemble cast can bring an adaptation to life in ways the source material just can't. Kerman's memoir is a more down-the-line look at life in an American women's prison, and as a result considerably less dramatic and honestly entertaining than the series. The show's creator, Jenji Kohan, evidently understood that Kerman's book needed some sexing up for the adaptation, and that she most certainly did, both by beefing up the roster of characters and the various scandals they inevitably ensnared within. A big difference in the show is that Piper and her girlfriend/partner in crime, Alex, are incarcerated in the same prison, a neat twist which actually wasn't true in reality. The Netflix series also had the benefit of being able to react to audience reception, as subsequent seasons began to drift progressively from Piper to the considerably more interesting ensemble, while also incorporating timely concerns such as blue-on-black violence. The book is generally less full of conflict, and while surely more realistic in that sense, doesn't have quite the same compulsive quality of the show. Number 5. The Leftovers. HBO's The Leftovers may never have received its awards due during its 3-season run, yet it remains one of the most acclaimed TV shows of the last decade for good reason. The show was created by Lost's Damon Lindelof and Tom Perrotta, the author of the 2011 novel on which the series is based. And though the show's first season clings fairly close to the novel, after that it leaps off to become a considerably deeper and more impactful piece of work. Comparing a 28-episode TV show to a single 336-page book may not seem inherently fair, but it's simply the case that the series used the novel as a launchpad for a more involved, emotional, and profound meditation on grief. This is aided, of course, by intensely powerful performances by Justin Theroux and Carrie Coon. Perrotta gets to keep a lot of the credit though, as he remained a major creative force throughout the show's 3 seasons, co-writing 8 episodes with Lindelof, including the series finale. Number 4. The 100. Given that The 100 aired on the CW, it was reasonable to expect the show to be a fairly down-the-line adaptation of Cass Morgan's series of young adult sci-fi novels, the first of which was published just 6 months before the TV show premiered. And for a decent chunk of its first season, The 100 was indeed a cheeseball teen drama show with a sci-fi gloss. Yet after this, it mercifully developed into something darker, edgier, more violent, and more character-driven. Compared to the younger skewing novel series, the TV show's more mature approach created night and day differences, ensuring it appealed to a much wider and more diverse demographic. Characterization-wise, the show is leagues ahead of the books, and given that the novels and show were effectively being written at the same time by 2 separate parties, it's perhaps best to think of them as disparate companion pieces. Either way, the show skirts a lot of the young adult tropes that the books willfully indulge, which is really all you need to know. Number 3. Justified. FX's terrific Western crime series Justified is centered around the character of Raylan Givens, created by legendary author Elmore Leonard, with Givens appearing in the novels Pronto, Riding the Rap, Raylan, and the short story Fire in the Hole, the latter serving as a particular influence on the show. As brilliantly pulpy as Leonard's works are, Justified pulls off the extremely tricky task of delivering an adaptation that feels firmly consistent with his voice and vision, while weaving and growing into its own rich, delineated web of characters and scenarios. The expansive quality of the 6-season show combines with towering performances from the ensemble cast to somehow put even more meat on the bones of Leonard's written ideas. Though there's little competition between the books and the show, Justified uses the building blocks of Leonard's source to somehow create something even better. Number 2. The Boys. Amazon's deliciously irreverent superhero series The Boys is adapted from Garth Ennis and Derek Robertson's hit comic book series of the same name. Yet even big fans of the comic will largely agree that the TV adaptation is just so far ahead of it. First and foremost, the comic often feels like it's being edgy for nothing but its own sake, reveling in brutal violence and even making crass jokes out of sexual abuse. It is, in that stead, a dated product of the 2000s and early 2010s. Revolutionary and creative in its own way, but ultimately the TV show has quite expertly cherry-picked the characters and situations that worked and abandoned those juvenile, immature parts that don't. Yet The Boys certainly retains the spirit of the source. It's anarchic, graphically violent, hilarious, and unafraid to broach touchy topics more straight-laced shows wouldn't dare consider. But it also knows when the comic devolves into being a edgelord circle jerk, and so pulls back just enough that it can actually, resonate with general audiences. Number 1. Killing Eve. Though there's a lot of justified scorn for how it ended, BBC's Killing Eve remains one of the most acclaimed and feted thriller shows of the last decade. Adapted from Luke Jennings' Villanelle series of novels, the masterstroke of the TV series was in hiring Fleabag's Phoebe Waller-Bridge as head writer for the first season, before passing the baton to Emerald Fennell. The pair brought a prickly, spiky, and yes, feminist voice to the TV show, rather lacking in the male-penned novels, while the central performances from Jodie Comer and Sandra Oh added a dimensionality and clarity to Villanelle and Eve that the books just couldn't. The books, while good, feel pallid compared to the striking, vibrant, punchy TV show, which nails a far more fluid, exciting tone courtesy of Waller-Bridge's contributions in particular. All in all, the TV series is just a more sophisticated and satisfying enterprise. Until we get to season 4, anyway.